After the Second World War, the nature of conflict had changed. Front lines were no longer enough. Victory would depend on what happened far behind them. As the Cold War began, the Soviet Union faced a problem that conventional armies could not solve. Across Europe, NATO bases, airfields, and missile sites were expanding rapidly. If war came, these targets would need to be neutralized before the first tanks ever crossed a border. The solution was not a new weapon, it was a new type of soldier. In the late 1940s and early 1950s, the GRU formed small special-purpose reconnaissance units. Their missions sounded simple: infiltration, reconnaissance, sabotage. In reality, they were designed for operations that could never be acknowledged. These early units would later become known as Spetsnaz. This video breaks down the early Spetsnaz loadout of the 1950s and 1960s, not as exotic equipment, but as a reflection of why the unit was created and how it was meant to fight. Item 1, the standard Soviet field uniform. The first problem was visibility. Early Spetsnaz were not meant to look special, they were meant to blend in. There was no dedicated uniform for Spetsnaz during this period. Operators wore the same field uniforms issued to regular Soviet forces, M43, and later, M55. This was intentional. If captured, there would be no visual evidence of a special unit. Anonymity was part of survival. Item 2, the KLMK Camouflage Oversuit. Standard uniforms were not always enough. For reconnaissance and infiltration, concealment became critical. By the late 1950s, lightweight camouflage oversuits began to appear. The KLMK suit was worn over the standard uniform. It was thin, breathable, and easily discarded if necessary. This was not about comfort. It was about remaining unseen long enough to complete the mission. Item 3, standard Soviet undergarments. The environment was unforgiving: cold nights, wet terrain, long movements with minimal rest. Early Spetsnaz relied on standard Soviet-issued undergarments, simple, durable, designed to retain warmth and survive extended use. There was nothing distinctive about them. That was the point. Item 4, field cap or steel helmet. There was no specialized headgear. Operators used standard field caps or steel helmets, depending on the mission. Nothing unique, nothing experimental. Early Spetsnaz doctrine favored familiarity over innovation. Item 5, Soviet leather combat boots. Mobility mattered, but endurance mattered more. Soviet leather combat boots were heavy and stiff. They were not comfortable. But they survived long marches, harsh terrain, and extended operations. Comfort was secondary, reliability came first. Item 6, the AK-47 by the late 1950s. The AK-47 became the defining weapon of Soviet forces. For Spetsnaz, it solved one problem above all others: reliability, mud, snow, dust, neglect. The rifle continued to function. Accuracy was acceptable. Precision was secondary. For infiltration units, a weapon that always worked mattered more than anything else. Item 7, the SKS Carbine. Before the AK fully replaced it, the SKS filled the role. It was lighter, simpler, and accurate enough for reconnaissance teams. Many early Spetsnaz units carried the SKS during this transitional period. Doctrine was still evolving, so was the equipment. Item 8, the PM Makarov pistol. There were no specialized sidearms. The PM Makarov was the standard Soviet pistol: compact, reliable, simple. Early Spetsnaz doctrine did not emphasize close quarters gunfighting. The pistol was a last resort, not a primary weapon. Item 9, the RGD-5 grenade. Sabotage required speed. The RGD-5 fragmentation grenade was lightweight and easy to carry. It could be deployed quickly, allowing the team to disengage immediately. Destruction was brief. Survival came afterward. Item 10, standard Soviet webbing. Every piece of equipment had a fixed place. Standard webbing carried ammunition, grenades, and essential tools. There was no modular system, no personal customization. Uniformity simplified training and logistics. Item 11, the Reconnaissance Rucksack. Early Spetsnaz did not rely on specialized airborne packs. They carried simple reconnaissance rucksacks made from canvas, lightweight, and easy to replace. Inside were only the essentials: food, ammunition, navigation tools, and demolition equipment. Nothing extra. Everything had a purpose. Item 12, maps and navigation equipment. Radio silence was doctrine. Navigation relied on paper maps and planning done before insertion. Routes were memorized, objectives were rehearsed. Every transmission increased the risk of detection. Silence was survival. Item 13, the military compass, mechanical, reliable, untraceable. The compass required no power and gave away no position. It was essential for deep infiltration behind enemy lines. Item 14, the wristwatch, time coordination replaced communication. Wristwatches were simple, mechanical, and unremarkable, issued or privately purchased. They allowed precise synchronization without radio contact. Every movement was planned down to the minute. Early Soviet Spetsnaz were not defined by advanced technology. They were defined by preparation, by discipline, and by missions designed for a war that everyone hoped would never happen. Their equipment reflected that reality, not specialized, not individualized, but carefully chosen to support infiltration, sabotage, and disappearance. This was the loadout of a force built for silence,